Imagine being in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by thousands of tons of steel, a floating city. Around you, luxury restaurants sparkle with crystal chandeliers. Infinity pools reflect the moonlight. The sound of laughter echoes through marble corridors. This is paradise. This is escape. This is what you paid for. But something is wrong. That metallic groan coming from the lower decks, that's not normal. The slight tilt beneath your feet, that's not the waves. And that announcement telling everyone to remain calm, that's the first lie in a series of lies that will cost lives. You're surrounded by miles of dark, freezing water, thousands of feet deep, or no land in sight, no escape. And the ship, this massive fortress of luxury and safety, is about to become your tomb. Today, we're diving into the darkest moments when vacation dreams turned into nightmares, when the unsinkable sank, when paradise became hell. These are the worst cruise ship tragedies ever, and every single one of them is real. January 13th, 2012, the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Italy. The Costa Concordia was a floating palace, 952 feet long, 17 decks high, carrying 4,252 people. Passengers from around the world had boarded this ship for what was supposed to be a week of Mediterranean luxury. Families celebrating anniversaries, honeymooning couples, elderly retirees finally taking that dream vacation they'd saved for decades. Captain Francesco Schettino stood on the bridge, 52 years old, experienced, confident, too confident. At 9:45 p.m., most passengers were finishing dinner. The ship's restaurants were full. Wine flowed. Children ran through the corridors. In the theater, a magic show was about to begin. Everything was perfect. But Captain Schettino had decided to do something special. Something he'd done before. A salute to the island of Giglio. He would steer the massive ship close to shore, close enough for islanders to see, close enough to wave. It was showboating. It was ego. It was about to become mass murder. The ship approached the rocky coastline at 16 knots. That's nearly 20 miles per hour. For a vessel weighing 149,500 tons, that's an enormous amount of kinetic energy, unstoppable momentum. At 9:45 p.m. and 10 seconds, the ship's hull struck a rock formation called Le Sewol. The sound was unlike anything the passengers had ever heard, a deep, grinding roar of metal being torn apart. The entire ship shuddered, glasses shattered. People fell from their chairs. Below the waterline, a 174-foot gash had been ripped into the hull. Water began flooding in at a catastrophic rate. Not a trickle, not a leak. A violent, pressurized torrent. The ocean was reclaiming the space humans had stolen from it. The ship's watertight compartments, designed to contain flooding, were compromised. Water rushed from one section to another. The ship began listing, tilting. The laws of physics were now in control, not the captain. In the engine room, the crew watched in horror as seawater poured in. The generators failed, the lights flickered, emergency power kicked in, but it was too late. The ship was dying. Passengers felt the tilt. At first, just a few degrees. Uncomfortable but not terrifying. Then 10 degrees, 20 degrees. Furniture began sliding across floors. Plates crashed from tables. The swimming pool sloshed violently, water spilling over the edges. At 30 degrees, the ship became a funhouse of horror. Corridors that had been horizontal were now steep ramps. Elderly passengers couldn't climb. Children screamed. The marble floors, so beautiful hours before, became slick death traps. Captain Schettino made the announcement. "We've had a blackout. Remain calm. A blackout." Not we've hit rocks, not we're sinking, a blackout. Passengers tried to return to their cabins to get life jackets, but the corridors were tilting more and more. Some cabins were now impossible to reach. The doors opened onto walls. Gravity had shifted. Up was no longer up. The ship continued to roll. 45 degrees, 60 degrees. People were climbing over railings that were now horizontal. The beautiful atriums with their glass elevators became vertical shafts. Anyone who fell would plummet stories down. In the lower decks, passengers were trapped. The water was rising, cold, dark, relentless. Some cabins had no windows, no light, just the sound of rushing water and the screams of others. The evacuation was chaos. Lifeboats on the high side of the ship couldn't be launched. They were suspended in air, useless. Lifeboats on the low side were pressed against the ship's hull, also useless. Only a few could be deployed. People jumped into the freezing water. The Mediterranean in January is 57 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill in less than an hour. They swam toward the rocks. Some made it, some didn't. Captain Schettino abandoned ship, while passengers were still trapped inside. While people were drowning in the lower decks, he climbed into a lifeboat and left. The Italian Coast Guard commander, Gregorio De Falco, made a call that would become legendary. He ordered Schettino back to the ship. "Get back on board, for fuck's sake." The captain refused. He claimed he had tripped into the lifeboat. 32 people died that night, crushed by falling debris, drowned in flooded cabins, lost in the dark, tilted corridors. Their vacation, their dream, their last moments were spent in a sideways metal labyrinth filling with seawater. The Costa Concordia lay on its side for 2 years, a massive corpse visible from shore, a reminder, a warning. Captain Schettino was sentenced to 16 years in prison for manslaughter and abandoning ship. But no prison sentence brings back the dead. No trial erases the terror of those final moments. September 28, 1994, the Baltic Sea, between Estonia and Sweden. The MS Estonia was a roll-on, roll-off ferry. That means vehicles could drive directly onto the ship through a massive bow door called a visor. It was efficient, it was fast, it was a fatal design flaw. 852 people were aboard. Most were sleeping. It was 1 a.m. The ship was crossing from Tallinn, Estonia to Stockholm, Sweden. A routine overnight journey. Passengers had booked cabins. Truckers slept in their vehicles. Families were tucked into bunk beds. The Baltic Sea was rough that night. Waves reached 13 to 20 feet. Not unusual. The ship had handled worse. But something was wrong with the bow visor. The visor was a massive steel door, weighing 55 tons. It was held in place by hydraulic locks and hinges. But the locks had been weakening. Maintenance had been deferred. Inspections had been cursory. The ship's owners prioritized profit over safety. At 1:15 a.m., the bow visor failed. The locks gave way. The hinges snapped. The entire 55-ton door was ripped off by the force of the waves. It fell into the sea, but that wasn't the worst part. Behind the visor was the inner ramp. This was supposed to be watertight. It wasn't. With the visor gone, waves began smashing directly against the inner ramp. Each wave hit with thousands of tons of force. The ramp buckled, bent, failed. Water poured into the vehicle deck, not slowly, violently. A horizontal waterfall of seawater flooding into the ship's belly. The vehicle deck was massive, open, unpartitioned. When water entered, it sloshed from side to side. This is called the free surface effect. It's catastrophic. The ship began to list. Passengers woke to alarms, to screaming, To the sensation of the floor tilting beneath them, they stumbled into corridors, confused, terrified. Many were in their underwear. Some were naked. There had been no time. The ship listed 30 degrees in minutes, then 45 degrees, then 90 degrees. It rolled onto its side like a dying whale. Cabins that had been horizontal were now vertical. Doors opened onto ceilings. Beds became walls. People fell, tumbled, broke bones. The ship was a rotating coffin. Those who made it to the outer decks faced a new horror. The lifeboats on the high side were unreachable, suspended 100 feet in the air. The lifeboats on the low side were underwater. Only a handful of life rafts deployed successfully. The water temperature was 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia sets in within 15 minutes. Death within 30 to 60 minutes. People who survived the sinking died in the water, floating, waiting, freezing. The MS Estonia sank in less than 30 minutes. From the first alarm to complete submersion, 30 minutes. There was no time to think, no time to plan, only time to react. And for most, their reactions weren't fast enough. 852 people were aboard. Only 137 survived. 715 people died. Most were trapped inside, drowned in their cabins, crushed by falling furniture, lost in the dark, tilted corridors as water rose around them. The ship now rests at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, 260 feet down. It's a mass grave. Diving is prohibited. The dead remain inside. Investigations revealed the bow visor failure, design flaws, maintenance negligence. But the dead don't care about investigations. They're still down there, in the dark, in the cold. Forever. April 16th, 2014, off the coast of South Korea. The MV Sewol was a ferry carrying 476 people. 325 of them were high school students on a field trip to Jeju Island, teenagers, 16 and 17 years old, excited, laughing, taking selfies. They had no idea they were about to die. At 8:48 a.m., the ship made a sharp turn. Too sharp, too fast. The cargo had been improperly secured, overloaded. When the ship turned, the cargo shifted. Thousands of tons of weight moved to one side. The ship began to list. Slowly at first, then faster. The students felt it. They looked at each other. Nervous laughter. Is this normal? At 8:52 a.m., an announcement came over the intercom. Do not move. Stay where you are. It's dangerous to move. The students obeyed. They were good kids, respectful. They trusted authority. They stayed in their seats, in their cabins. They waited for instructions. The ship continued to tilt. 30 degrees, 45 degrees. Water began entering the lower decks. The students could hear it. A distant, rushing sound, like a waterfall, getting closer. At 9 a.m., another announcement. Stay in your cabins. Do not move. The students stayed. Some sent text messages to their parents. Mom, I love you. Dad, I'm scared. The ship is sinking. Their parents, miles away, could do nothing but watch the news and pray. The ship tilted past 60 degrees. Cabins became vertical. Students clung to furniture, to each other. Some tried to climb out. The corridors were flooded, dark, disorienting. They turned back. At 9:30 a.m., the ship was nearly on its side. The captain and crew abandoned ship. They climbed into lifeboats and left. They left the students inside, trapped, waiting, obeying orders. Rescue ships arrived. Coast Guard helicopters hovered overhead. They could see the ship sinking. They could see people trapped inside, waving through windows. But the rescue was slow, disorganized, incompetent. Some students broke windows and escaped. They swam to rescue boats, but most stayed inside, following orders, waiting to be saved. The ship sank at 10:31 a.m. It rolled completely over and slipped beneath the surface. 304 people died. 250 of them were students, children. They died because they were told to stay, because they trusted, because they obeyed. Divers recovered the bodies over the following weeks. The students were found in their cabins, in the corridors, huddled together, holding hands. Their last moments were spent in darkness, in rising water, knowing they were going to die. The captain, Lee Jun-seok, was sentenced to life in prison for murder. The crew members received sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years. But the families don't care about sentences. Their children are gone, forever. The South Korean government fell into crisis. The president was eventually impeached, partly due to the mishandling of the disaster. But political consequences don't bring back the dead. The MV Sewol was eventually raised from the ocean floor in 2017, 3 years after it sank. Inside, they found the students' belongings, backpacks, phones, shoes, reminders of lives cut short. July 24, 1915, Chicago, Illinois, the Chicago River. The SS Eastland was a passenger ship designed to carry 2,500 people. It was top-heavy, unstable. Everyone knew it. But it kept operating because it was profitable. On this day, the ship was chartered by Western Electric Company for an employee picnic. Families boarded, workers, their wives, their children. It was a beautiful summer morning. They were excited. A day cruise across Lake Michigan. Food, music, fun. 2,572 people boarded. The ship was packed, overcrowded. People stood shoulder to shoulder on the decks. Below deck, more passengers filled the cabins and corridors. The ship was still tied to the dock. It hadn't even left yet. At 7:28 a.m., the ship began to list to one side, just a few degrees. Passengers laughed. They thought it was funny. They moved to the other side to balance it out. The ship rocked back, then listed again, farther this time. At 7:30 a.m., the ship rolled onto its side, completely in 20 feet of water, still tied to the dock. It happened in seconds. Passengers on the upper decks were thrown into the river. They could swim. They could be rescued. But passengers below deck were trapped. The ship's interior became a death trap. Corridors filled with water, cabins flooded. People were pinned against walls, against ceilings. They couldn't escape. The exits were underwater, or blocked by debris, or crushed shut by the ship's weight. Rescuers smashed through the hull with axes and hammers. They pulled out survivors, and bodies. So many bodies, women, children, entire families. 844 people died, most of them drowned within 20 feet of the dock, within sight of safety. They could see the shore. They could see people trying to help. But they couldn't escape. The SS Eastland disaster remains the deadliest shipwreck in Great Lakes history. More people died on the Eastland than on the Titanic's American passengers. But most people have never heard of it. Why? Because it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a luxury liner hitting an iceberg in the Atlantic. It was a cheap, overcrowded ship that rolled over at the dock. It was a tragedy of negligence, of greed, of ignoring warning signs. The ship was later salvaged and converted into a naval training vessel. It served for decades. The same ship that killed 844 people was repurposed, used, as if the dead didn't matter. March 23, 2019, off the coast of Norway, the Viking Sky was a modern cruise ship, state-of-the-art, carrying 1,373 passengers and crew. Most passengers were elderly, retirees. This was their dream vacation. Norway's fjords, the northern lights, luxury. At 2:01 p.m., the ship was sailing through rough seas. Waves reached 26 feet. Not unusual for the Norwegian Sea. The ship had handled worse. Then the engines stopped. All four of them, simultaneously. The ship lost power. No propulsion, no steering. It began drifting toward the rocky coastline. The crew dropped anchor, but the anchors couldn't hold in the storm. The ship was being pushed toward the rocks. Passengers were told to put on life jackets and go to the muster stations. Many were in their 70s and 80s. Some used walkers, some were in wheelchairs. They struggled to move through the tilting, rocking ship. Waves smashed through windows. Seawater poured into the corridors. Furniture slid across floors. People fell, broke bones. The ship was out of control. The crew sent a mayday. Norwegian rescue helicopters responded. But evacuating 1,373 people by helicopter in a storm is nearly impossible. The helicopters could only take 15 to 20 people at a time. For 14 hours, helicopters hovered over the ship, winching people up one by one. Elderly passengers were lifted in harnesses, swinging in the wind, terrified. Some had heart attacks, some were injured during the evacuation. The ship came within 100 meters of the rocks. If it had hit, it would have been torn apart. Everyone aboard would have died. But the crew managed to restart one engine. Just one. It was enough. They steered away from the rocks. The ship limped to port. 479 people were evacuated by helicopter. 17 were injured. But no one died. It was a miracle, a near miss. A reminder of how close luxury can come to catastrophe. The investigation revealed the cause: low oil levels in the engines. Maintenance failure. The engines had automatic shutoffs to prevent damage. When oil levels dropped, all 4 engines shut down simultaneously. A safety feature became a death sentence. The Viking Sky incident didn't result in mass casualties. But it showed how quickly a modern ship can become helpless, how fast paradise can turn to panic. These are the stories they don't show in the cruise brochures. The metallic groans, the rising water, the tilting corridors, the cold, dark ocean waiting below. Every year, millions of people board cruise ships. Most have wonderful vacations. But some don't come home. The ocean doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your family waiting for you. It's indifferent, powerful, eternal. And when something goes wrong at sea, there's nowhere to run, no exit, no escape. Just you, the water, and the hope that someone will save you before it's too late. The next time you board a cruise ship, take a moment. Listen to the sounds, feel the vibrations, look at the lifeboats, read the safety instructions. Because in the middle of the ocean, those instructions might be the only thing standing between you and the deep. This is the painful truth. And the truth is, the ocean always wins.